It's really good when you have this kind of reception that you know the people you paid and planned in the audience, they are doing their job. So the talk is called How to Cultivate a Language. My name is Alvaro, and I'm all sound on Twitter. But you probably don't want to follow me because anything that you hear here rarely will appear on that platform, but you have to have your Twitter handle, right? I'm a little bit about me. I'm from Uruguay. Currently, I live in Switzerland, in Zurigo, and I work at Microsoft. So let's start with an example about interpretation, because something that I really like about DDD is how it has a very big focus on language. And basically, DDD say, OK, let's fix problems with language. OK, then you bought 99 problems. That's really good. So language is not that easy, actually. Gesundheit. I don't know what happened there. So let's say you see that in some metro station. Dogs must be carried on an escalator, right? So let's see how easy it is to interpret language. Does it mean that you must carry a dog in the escalator? Are you going to be banned from the escalator unless you find a stray dog to carry? Carried is to be taken metaphorically and help dogs get through life. How do I know this is not a decoration? How do you know this is a sign that you actually should follow? Compare this from when the same sign appears, I don't know, in somebody's bedroom because they stole it from the metro, right? I need to understand that the sign has been placed there by some authority, that if I don't follow this authority, maybe I'm kicked out from the metro. And conventions. I understand that escalator means this escalator, wherever we are, and not some escalator in Paraguay. And must be means must be now. So this little exercise shows us that even such a simple sign, there is a lot of things that we know through the years of use of language that we kind of understand what this sign means and how it should be used and what it means to us. Because there is context, there is a lot of things there that frame the sign and let us use it properly. So, the thing with semiotics, with literary theory, with linguistics, is that these people, these researchers, have been studying all these things for ages. Actually, you could say you could trace back semiotics even to ancient China or to Aristotle, depending on what are your preferences. Tao Te Ching, Tao Te Ching, that is pure semiotics when it starts. So there is a lot of research done on how language works, how it signifies, how it helps us communicate. So let's take a brief look about theories and explanatory power, trying to understand why I'm bringing semiotics into a DDD conference. Back in the 80s, people at Xerox Research Center, they were developing gossip algorithms. Gossip algorithms are used for replication. And the idea or the metaphor of a gossip algorithm is like gossip, like in the typical South American telenovela. I say something to somebody, that person says it to two other people, and two, and then it grows in some way. The information is transferred, right? Replicated. This is really easy to explain, the power of this metaphor. I mean, this metaphor has that power, but the researchers found that it was hard to reason about or with this metaphor, until some of them realized that this type of replication was actually more similar to epidemics. And when we saw, like in the same virus goes to a host, has some, I mean, probably people are familiar with viruses after 3 years of like a very crash course we had in pandemics. Yeah, all this behavior from viruses had been studied by this theory, which this book dates back to the 50s. So this author from this paper, actually, they got inspiration from that, got the mathematical theory from that, and and they had a jump in their understanding of the problem they were trying to solve. Because metaphors, they have explanatory power. And if you want to read more, I wrote this article for the ACM a while back called Metaphors We Compute By, based on the work of Lakoff, trying to find and explain why we should and be careful about the metaphors we use in programming. But in any case, I believe that for DDD, semiotics could be such a theory if we use some of these concepts. And when I talk about semiotics, I must say that I'm bringing mostly the Italian semiotics, which is the school of Bologna from Umberto Eco. You may know him from The Name of the Rose and other books, movies. But he wrote a lot about semiotics. And there is a school that developed there where more researchers continue his work. And I will be basing my talk mostly in these other researchers. And Eco says that these theories or these philosophies like semiotics, we need to be careful because it's a philosophy as a way to explain how the world works. It's not a science. It's not something that you're going to be empirically testing. These entities exist insofar as the theory posits them. And if you move away from one of these philosophies, then all the system loses unity, cohesion, organization. In a way, if we want to think in a very tragic way, think about the world if there were no humans, right? There is no more borders, no money has no more value, etc., etc. All these philosophies that we use to organize the world suddenly will disappear. So again, we use these philosophies to classify the world. So eating beef on Good Friday is just a physical event. But under certain philosophies, this could be considered bad. And we use this framework to explain the world because they have very, very great explanatory power. And the good thing is that science bases itself on this type of thing. Science decides the ontology of the different entities that they will study on some sort of philosophy. Because, I don't know, you are assuming that zum Beispiel, I was going to say, I'm sorry, I live in a German-speaking country. For instance, when we argue about even the existence of the world, it's just or senses that create this world that we see, are we in a dream or whatever, you know, all these kind of things, but when you decide on one, you are actually choosing a particular philosophy. And to finish on this whole thing, a philosophy, in this case semiotics, will be true insofar as it will give us a coherent form to the world. So the followers of this philosophy have a coherent way of dealing with the world. In the case of semiotics, and there is a philosophy in this sense, semiotics studies the human signifying activity. Everything that is used to signify will be subject of semiotics. So mostly, but not necessarily, it studies languages via languages, and studies the semiotic animal, which is us. So for me, instead of saying that we are Homo sapiens, and this is, I will think, quite important for DDD to really bring this to heart, let's say, is that we are not Homo sapiens, we are Homo interpretans. We are constantly interpreting the world around us. So it doesn't matter how many agreements you have, how many models you have, how many whiteboards you fill with triangles and things and arrows, we will always be interpreting. And sometimes this interpretation will skew from your idea of how the model is. So what I'm trying to bring through the rest of the talk is this thing that is central to semiotics, and that is like we are always interpreting. We are always looking for meaning. And in the case of programming or DDD, if you will, We need to understand how our models create meaning, how they signify. Because in the same sense of that sign at the metro, there are many things surrounding the sign that signify, not just the drawing. Even the drawing is a cultural unit that has this kind of thing. So, yeah. One idea that is from Semiotics Literary Theory is the idea of possible worlds or fictional worlds. And I tell you this little story while I grab my water. So I called a carriage and told the driver to take me to my hotel. Right? You're probably trying to figure out what is going on. Mid-flight, one of the propulsion engines shut down, so we had to do an emergency landing. Kind of a twist, right? What happens here? Fictional worlds are parasitical worlds because if alternative properties are not spelled out, we take for granted the properties holding in the real world. So in this example, or this one actually, probably you thought about a horse pulling a carriage, driving through some cobblestones, reaching a hotel. But when suddenly the story takes this turn, what is going on here, right? It means that this fictional world that you created based on the information I shared was filled with a lot of details that actually were not given by the author. And I like to say, like, I don't know how many of you know the Lord of the Rings, but when you saw Frodo crying because he was stabbed by some Nazgul, you killed Frodo, or you made him sick, because Tolkien, nowhere in the Lord of the Rings, specified the anatomy of hobbits, how resistant or not are to whatever type of poison, that they have a system internally that gets poisoned, blah, 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 blah. We assume it's so, because otherwise Tolkien first needs to build an encyclopedia, and then we can read the book. So due to a cooperative strategy, that is how it's called in literary theory, we develop, as an author, you develop a strategy where you posit a model reader and try to negotiate what this person probably needs to know to read your book. So these possible fictional worlds, they are parasitical of the real world. Missing properties are filled up from the real world. We use our own knowledge of the world and transpose it into the fictional world. It's part, as I said, of textual cooperation strategy, this model reader. And anytime you're building a world, you also need to build this reader. Because in the story I said before, when I talk about propulsion engines, maybe you are or steam engine, perhaps, you will say, OK, this is a steampunk type of story. So just by telling you steam engine, you are building, or I'm building the reader that starts, oh, OK, maybe it's a steampunk type of fiction, OK, and you can move yourself in that thing. And then probably now you're asking yourself, OK, it's been 15 minutes that this talk is going, why do I care, right? Because at some point, you will work with a real-world project. And you will have to talk to customers. And let's say you go to talk about a supermarket, and the supermarket has an inventory from where customers fetch items, place them in their shopping carts, and then pay for them by the cashier. Everything in the previous description of a supermarket will be filled with your past experience of supermarkets, when your encyclopedic knowledge of supermarkets, not with how that particular supermarket works. And then, many times, I know DDD is trying to change this, but many times developer will have no contact with the product, the final product, or the thing we are trying to represent from the real world, and we are filling in information from our own knowledge into those words. So I mean, I'm pretty sure you have many cases from your real-world projects when some class is doing something that is completely unexpected or completely unnecessary because somebody projected some need in that class that actually was not part of the original problem. So the thing is, in the same way that I guess I tricked you with the carriage story, there is no way for us to avoid this type of behavior. We always try to anticipate, to predict, to kind of guess what's coming. That's, in a way, how our brain works with language. It's always trying to predict what is coming next. There is a lot of research on that, but it's not part of the talk. But anyway, where are we getting now into? We are getting into lexical competence. This is a book by another Italian, Diego Marconi. And he provides the example of the scientist, a native, and a butterfly. So imagine a scientist that has read everything about a certain species, but he has never seen an exemplar. And the native has been playing with the butterfly all his life. The scientist may find, like he goes there to wherever this butterfly lives, and they may fail to recognize one in real life, while the native has no issues knowing which one is that particular butterfly. You will see soon why this is relevant. So Marconi says that there are two aspects of semantic competence. One is knowledge of true sentences in which certain word is used. Another one is knowledge of the relevant application of the word in the real world. So again, think programmers implementing a supermarket versus people working at the supermarket. You, as a programmer, because maybe you are working on the database model, maybe you are working on the objects and how they are linked together and whatnot, you can have a lot of knowledge because your program is basically producing a lot of these type of sentences, but maybe, I mean, a supermarket is a very simple example because most of us has gone to a supermarket, but maybe you don't know how those things affect work in real life. Think of you have your inventory class or item, and one of those items is a 6-pack of water, and then there is a customer there in the shop, and he cannot find a bottle of water. 6 is way too many for what they need. They just put the nail through the nylon, scratch it, remove a bottle, and go and pay. What happened to your definition of unity, inventory, and whatnot? Because those things happen in that real world. Then another one that Marconi mentions is that we have inferential competence, which is the ability to manage a network of connections among words. So you can do definitions, you can retrieve a word by definition, you can find synonyms. But the referential ability is when you are able to map these things into the world. So one thing is like how you work in your brain, let's say with words. Can you read me a fork and any other utensil you find on the table? You are able to, okay, he wants a fork, and probably if I see a knife and a spoon, because, right? This type of things is the inferential. And then referential, when you go and say, he say fork, and you come back with this. Okay, maybe you don't know what is a fork, right? Again, this seems very obvious, seems like, yeah, I've been using language all my life, right? Problem is that software projects, we tend to accrue a lot of inferential competence, but many times we lack the referential one. And this is because we are not so used to this constant negotiation and going through the customer. And I know that DDD is trying to push for that, or is pushing for that. But what I'm trying to tell you here is there are theories of semantics and lexical competence that have been going very deep about what you need to be competent in a language, and they found that you have this type of competences and you need to develop them and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, yes, what you are doing is right, and here is why it's right. And if somebody, tomorrow you need to argue with a manager and say, no, we don't need to go to the supermarket and talk to those guys, you're a programmer, you should know what you're doing, you know now why you should actually push for going there. This is a very old book, but Judy Bashman, she has a lot of great books related to technology and feminism. But she shows plenty of times where male developers with a lot of inferential knowledge fail at building products that included women due to a lack of referential knowledge about literally having no clue about how women's body work or what are the needs and so on. And again, it seems simple because I am a programmer and I am smart, but suddenly you are creating pills that will be used in women, but you only choose a male side of the population for testing them. I'm not inventing examples. These things have happened. And then women feel bad or have adverse effects to these medicines or reactions, and it's because they were never tested on them, despite them being the target population. So, first homework, work on developing your team's lexical competence for the project at hand. It has to be something that is very active, something that you constantly and conscientiously do. But you can say also, like, OK, we have a lot of words. We need to know the definitions. That's easy, right? Like, we can create a dictionary and problem solved. Like, people can go and check the dictionary. But then we start asking the questions like, what should go in a dictionary? How do we define the properties of a word? And this word maybe later will be reflected in code. So Eco has an article of dictionary versus encyclopedia, in which he says that in defining a term and its corresponding concept, the dictionary model is expected to take into account only those properties necessary and sufficient to distinguish that particular concept from others. For instance, if you have a dog in a dictionary, it will tell you that it's an animal, a mammal, or a canine. But you don't need to write that the dog is barking. Some dogs may not bark. And you don't need to say that they can be domesticated, because some dogs aren't. So in the definition, these are not necessary properties or essential, and some of the others are. Why? Because what you are trying to encode in these words is knowledge of a language versus knowledge of the world. And why do I bring this up now? Because at some point, you will have arguments about language and about what should go in this language that you are creating. And let me tell you, there has been a lot of philosophers arguing what belongs into a word, what belongs in the definition of a word, what should go out, what creates a problem. And I will show you later an example. So what semioticians kind of come to the conclusion is that dictionary systems are not enough, that better you use something called encyclopedia. And when they say encyclopedia, is in a way like a mega, hyper, huge encyclopedia, which is all the knowledge in the world, and then a more localized encyclopedia, which will be my knowledge or the knowledge of my community or this team creating a working on a software project. And another thing that we will see is when semiotics studies science, again, science is, could be a word, could be this emergency exit site, could be if I do like that, meaning bye-bye or whatever. Before, it was thought that science were very structured and very limited in what they did. But after post-structuralism, it was more understood that science actually had this sort of unlimited semiosis, meaning that you can associate to science one meaning, and then from there go to the next meaning, and so on in like some sort of network where every word can connect to a different word, and it's what Derrida calls the difference. And in the difference, he means that you know that a cat is not a dog because the words are different and whatnot, but also there is something that is deferred. So it's different and deferred. He mixed these two words in difference. And deferred means like, I don't know, you learn the idea of the color pink, but at some point you see somebody killing a pig and eating the pig. And then you saw pink there. And this augments connects back to your idea of pink. And then you are watching Formula One and you see the BWT team that is pink. And then maybe that also comes to your idea of pink, and this keeps growing. And the model of dictionary doesn't capture all these relations that words have between each other. That's why they say, OK, we need to go from code to encyclopedia. And here's where we come to the last part of the talk, where we call another Italian, this time Patrizia Violi. She is the successor, let's say, of Umberto Eco at the University of Bologna. So not easy task to take at hand, considering who Eco was in the Italian academia. And she says in this book that words work as inferential instruments. It's not that a word maps to concept. They give us some sort of tool to infer possible meanings. So she says, although language is rooted in experience and derives meaning and form from it, the relation between language and experience is not constituted as a model of one-to-one correspondences, but rather as a continual movement of distortions and approximations by means of which we try to render the form and sense of complex experiences linguistically. But important things, movement and distortions, and not one-to-one correspondence. Because if you have you read Notes on the Synthesis of Form by Alexander? I guess most of you have, or maybe Alexander is quite popular in this circle. Anyway, Alexander says that when you have a design problem, is when you have an interaction between context and form, and you need to adapt one to another, let's say, because you want to create water boiler, but the water boiler needs to be adapted to the market it will land, to the type of materials you want to do. If you target like people that have more money to spend on water boilers or not, depends. There are many things that will make you choose a design for the water pot. But when you have a one-to-one mapping, he says, you don't have a design problem, because there is nothing to design. You just need to connect things together. So in this case, in language, rarely when we work with real-world projects, we will have very fixed type of words. So what I'm trying to prevent here is that person that comes to a team and say, yeah, but we already talked to the client. We already discussed this with the client. Actually, there is a wiki with that definition. You can check the class. There is a class with a type. Yeah, but this is not doing what customer X wants this thing to do. You know, because it's always this constant movement, distortion, approximations. In this process of readjustment, words function as inferential and abductive instruments, elements that activate possible inferences and so guide textual interpretation. And what does it mean? This abductive thing sounds very weird, but it comes from detective novels. So where, yes, detective novels like Poe and the stuff that came later. The abduction is when you create, let's say, you are trying to debug a system, and you find that the system is not accepting connections. So people will say the server is down, right? And you have an abduction. You guess it probably the operating system ran out of file descriptors. But then you actually go to the system and prove that this thing you said actually is there. Doctors, in many ways, I suppose they use this a lot. And in language, we constantly use this because we need to guess where or in which context this word makes sense. If I say, or if I would have written there the word chat, C-H-A-T, what do you think it means? It could mean like chat as in chatting, but if it was French, it would mean a cat. Because based on probability, whatever, we say, OK, chat seems to be online thingy. OK, it's probably chatting. But no, it was a presentation about cats. So that is what the abduction, or Ren is constantly trying to do that because it needs to save energy. It's as simple as that. This goes more into neuroscience, but when the brain starts processing a sentence, it kind of expects that certain words, it primes the words, and it's been proven that if you remove those words and put some random word there in a sentence, and when they're watching the brain, let's say, it's like the neurons go like misfire, like what happened here? I was expecting that you say Italy has the best food, and you say Italy has the best, I don't know, semioticians. It's like, what do you do? Finally, she says, lexical meaning is not constituted as a system of fixed correlation, but by a set of possible inferences that are regulated in various ways and impose restriction of varying rigidity on interpretative processes. Okay, what? So you have all these inferences, and again, there is nothing fixed, but there are restrictions. And this is also, in a way, information theory. When you choose one word from all the information you have, at the moment you say, Italy is, I need to continue with, I don't have everything at my disposition. Restrictions start to happen into language. I don't know how many Dutch people are here, but is any Dutch here? Person? Yes. Okay. You know that. Yes? No? Yeah, they know. The people that are not Dutch probably have no clue what it is. I learned about this yesterday. It's the birthday of the king, and it seems to be a very important date in the Netherlands. Why? Why is such a date important? Because at the most basic thing is, yeah, it's just a date, a number, which, by the way, we learn to decipher a code. We know that there is a code that when some numbers appear in this fashion, 27 is the 27th day of the month, blah, 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 blah. Because we need to go into what Patricia Violi calls semantic and encyclopedic competence. We don't have encyclopedic competence when it comes to be, let's say, I don't want to be wild in this assertion, but an average Dutch person that you probably know when the king thing is because you have a holiday, I guess. That's the incentive to knowing that. So semantic and encyclopedic competence is a competence, in this case, is a concept of progressive cultural stabilization. It's a socially constituted agreement. It is in continuous evolution. And she says language is a constant process of becoming. So imagine, again, you're talking with your customer and your developers and everybody involved in a project, and you need to strive to have this sort of cultural stabilization, because you say, oh, great, I will create a language. Yes, sure, but languages usually have a culture and a lot of things to support them. And we developers, it's 5 p.m., ciao, go home. I hope. There is this type of agreement, always pushing in one direction and another, continuous evolution, and so on. Then, semantic and encyclopedic competence includes knowledge of the world of reference. Cat implies animal, dinosaur implies animal. But there was a time when the property extinct wasn't part of the meaning of dinosaur. And not knowing that dinosaurs are extinct today equals not knowing the meaning of a dinosaur. In our culture, if you don't know that if I tell you, watch out, a dinosaur, and you start running, you probably don't know what that means, right? But this book is from 2001, and it's quite sad to read this today, because now it's true. She says, what happens if koalas are in danger of extinction? Koalas are extinct will go from very specialized knowledge to public knowledge over time. And this happens in software projects. We need to try to get this encyclopedic competence, this one that knows all the little bits about how the supermarket works. I used to work for a supermarket in Switzerland that they didn't sell any alcohol. Not to, I mean, they didn't sell not to minors, but to nobody. They didn't sell alcohol. That was the policy. So the word drink there will mean something different. And you need to extend this encyclopedic competence so people know. And in Switzerland, nobody will go to that supermarket to buy a wine or whatever, because they don't sell that. So semantic competence precedes your interpretative choices, is more rigid. A term delimits context, and a term selection preconstitutes a frame of interpretative reference. Yes, and it's what we expect of a competent speaker. So when we talk about semantics, part of this competence is more about knowing like the basic of how words are, or what they mean. I guess because we went to supermarket, all of you will know cashier, shopping list, and so on. But there are some other things that maybe you don't know how that works, and that is this other thing. Because the encyclopedic one will open an horizon of interpretations, will change from context to context, could be an online-only supermarket. In an online-only supermarket, shopping cart, doesn't mean, I mean, it's not represented by anything in reality. While in the real world supermarket, there is an actual shopping cart. There is always this sort of inter-subject agreement, and must be verified from time to time by speakers. And she says, what counts is not what people actually know, but what people believe that everybody knows, and which is thus taken as a common background. How are you going to go to your next software project and challenge this? How do you go and try to shake the tree and find that maybe our agreement of the meaning of the word shopping cart wasn't the right one? Or safe. The software has to be safe, but safe for an X-ray machine or safe for reserving tickets for a football game. So, and for instance, when they say we need performance from the system, and you will agree on some sort of performance that will be implemented by your developers. When I was working at RabbitMQ, that was really common. RabbitMQ was tested usually to do between 20 to 25,000 messages per second. And some people, for them, performance was 1,000 per second, 100. And then you are using the same word, but there is not a match in there. So for sure, this is a problem of domain knowledge. And she says again, the dividing line is drawn only by conventional agreement about the knowledge which is assumed to be shared. And Eco says the difference between common sense knowledge and expert knowledge should be traced each time according to the context. Context is a text that surrounds any word. So again, they are telling us always challenge the assumptions because this is language and we are always willing to interpret and do something based on that interpretation, and we will probably fail. So there is idealized competence versus individual competence. I don't want to waste more time because there is the time is ticking, or the clock. But basically, yeah, how much competence is required to qualify as a competent speaker? I don't know, but the best way I would say it will be great if it is a common practice that developers spend more time doing things in wherever they are going to be implemented. I guess. Because in the end, you're always, we are implementing system by hearsay. By somebody went there, talked to the customer. That somebody is probably a PM that hasn't coded in the last 10 years, doesn't know about the limits of the current technology and advantages and I don't know what, and then comes with a specification that who knows if it's even worthy for us to use. So, to end, and this is some test I wanted to share with you, it's like, okay, you are building this model, you are building the words of the language, and you need to decide what goes into each word. What will be the essential versus the typical properties of these words? So essential properties are forms of entailment. An essential property entails something from the word. So bachelor entails human, cat entails animal. And typical properties give rise to probable inferences. If it is a cat, it will probably meow, probably. And they can be tested with this adversative but. So what does it mean? You can use but as a diagnostic test for properties. If the meaning of summer is connected to the property hot, it is summer, but it is not hot. Or it is summer, but it's hot. These two things, if you read it, start to be semantically anomalous. Like, what do you mean? But this is summer, but it's hot. It makes no sense to say that. So you start seeing that hot is an essential property of summer. So when you model your summer, please have that property. Or it is a bird, but it's able to fly, or it's a bird, but it's not able to fly. Sounds strange. Compared to, it is a bird, but it's oviparous, and it's a bird, but it's not oviparous. The first anomaly shows that able to fly is a typical property. It can be erased. And the second one is already anomalous on the first one, number 3, and number 4 is completely unacceptable. And why? Because if you erase the property oviparous from a bird, you are not talking about birds anymore. And you say, okay, dude, I'm in a DDD conference. What do I care about birds? Because when you create your classes, you can ask the same questions to your classes. It's a customer, but it has gender. It's a customer, but it doesn't have gender. And then you wonder, why do I even have the gender property here? Why so many people are being rejected by your forms? Because somebody decided to have a gender thing here. But when you start thinking about essential versus typical properties, you start to think what goes into the class that you, or the type that your program requires. So essential properties cannot be negated without renegotiating the meaning of the terms. And maybe it will happen that you try to negate a property, and then you see that maybe you need two types for that thing that you were implementing, because one actually adds a property that makes no sense there. So negating an essential property implies modifying the convention on which the previous meaning was based and introducing a new convention. And canceling them, the essential ones versus the typical ones, is a matter of resistance. Let's say that a good way to judge is that they will be more resistant to remove something that we consider essential. Usually, they require a process of semantic redefinition. And again, what's essential for a word is what a community of speakers consider essential in a given historical period. This is why the talk is called cultivating a language. It's not called growing a language, because cultivating and culture, they have the same roots. And it's basically saying this language is something we build as a culture. And then there are different degrees of essentiality. For instance, having 3 corners and being female are essential properties of triangle and mother, respectively. A triangle with 4 corners is inconceivable. While with modern gender discussions, we have been putting in doubt that being female is an essential property of mother. And we can see that our society today, with all the type of gender discussions that are happening, are doing a semantical reconstitution of what it means to be a woman. You can see that for yourself online. And I have the example that I mentioned earlier. It is a customer, but it has gender. It is a customer, but it doesn't have gender. Do you really need to have gender property in that customer type? This is a more extreme case, maybe more obvious case, but doing this type of checks, you can try to find this out. When we create the word for our domain language, we will need to decide which properties are essential and which are typical. Typical and essential properties will guide our API design based on the semantical agreement of our culture, culture being customer, developers, users. And finally, please don't kick me out, not all words are made equal, because also we have artifacts. So, and when you come to artifacts, we have perceptual properties and functional properties. And when we say perceptual, it's like the form, dimension, the general exterior appearance, and all of them can be erased. What is a chair? Does it need arms, a back, and 4 legs? In some cases, a pile of books can be considered to be a chair. But the functional properties, they cannot be erased, because a box will still be in a box if it's hermetically sealed, while if you have a block of wood or whatever and you paint it like a box, it's never going to be a box. Also, the functional potential matters. A broken car is still a car, a broken chair is still a chair. But what happens when we add the word fake? A fake car, a fake chair, and a fake pistol, for instance. So a pistol that fires bullets but looks like a lighter is not a fake pistol, it is a fake lighter, right? So second homework, be explicit about developing encyclopedic competence for your team members. Think about all these things about properties of words and the different type of words that have been classified. We need to converge via negotiation. And he says, in a real-life linguistic community, there are no final semantic authorities, and there are no guarantees that the optimization procedure that we all perform will issue a unique, absolutely certain result. The paradoxical character of language lies in the fact that while its practice must be subsequent to standard of correctness, there is no ultimate authority to impose those standards from without. Nobody can come and say, hey, dude, you are speaking English wrong. Yeah, fight me if you want. With most words of natural language, we have either baptismal ceremonies, we have neither baptismal ceremonies nor procedure for retrieving them. We have only uses, some more authoritative, some less. In a society, you have a whole thing that is pushing you to evolve a language, to evolve an encyclopedia. But in the case of a software project, you don't have that. You don't have the social apparatus, like the teacher saying, you don't spell this that way, you don't speak like that. All these things also are going to be there. But unlike a culture, we are dealing with a very small piece of reality, so it should be more manageable. But don't underestimate the challenges. And we have to be very intentional when we build a language on the code we write, the documentation, the build system, diagrams, customer interaction. Everything, you can read that paper I also wrote for the ACM, matters when we put meaning in language and we want others to be able to interpret what we wrote. But to end, beware of the source code, because unlike a culture, you do have source code, and whatever is run by your program is the truth, even if that truth is not the model represented in your language. We assemble a world from pieces, assuming that what we see is both coherent and equivalent to reality, until we discover it's not. So, cultivating a language is a matter of developing a culture, and that's what I hope we manage to do in programs. And thanks. That's all for me, and I'm running out of time. So thank you.